The US national debt is now over $38 trillion, and I'm here to tell you that the goal is to never pay it off. And that's because if the US government actually paid off all $38 trillion of debt, the entire global economy would collapse. And that's because on August 15th of 1971, Richard Nixon took the US off of its gold standard. And that meant that all money that was now in circulation and to be made in the future was based off of the full faith in the US government to pay back its own debts. And on August 15th, 1971, the US national debt was sitting at around $420 billion. And since then, we've obviously gone up over $37.6 trillion. That's almost a 100x in 55 years. And I get what you're thinking, Paul, how would the US economy and the global economy collapse if the US actually paid off all of its debt? And this is how. The first and obvious reason is that the US government would need to increase tax revenue and at the same time cut government spending significantly. This would end up shifting us from being in a deficit where we spend more money as a government than taking as tax revenue into a surplus, which means that our tax revenue would be more than our current government spending. And someone who's financially responsible would say, okay, that makes sense. Why don't we do that? And the main issue is that governments don't act like individuals. And if a government starts shrinking its national debt by first decreasing its deficit, it is essentially lowering the amount of new money that enters the economy through a deficit. And that in turn would end up shrinking the economy over time, because there would be less dollars in circulation. The next logical question would be, okay, how does the government essentially decrease or pay off its national debt? And this is where things get a little bit tricky. Unless if you've been living under a rock, inflation over the last few years has been record high. We've never seen levels this high in the last 40 to 50 years. But the government loves inflation, and there's two reasons for that. The first being inflation causes spending, and when spending occurs, there's more tax revenue to be generated that can go back to the government. The second reason is that inflation reduces the real value of the US government's debt over time because the dollars that are used to pay it off are worth less and less. So even if the US has the same amount of nominal debt, inflation over time essentially reduces the amount that the US needs to pay back using today's purchasing power, which can cause the US to fall into a debt cycle, which we will cover in the next video.